Book 9, chapters 1 to 2 of 10 books on architecture. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Fredrik Karlsson. 10 books on architecture by Vitruvius, translated by Morris Hickey Morgan. Chapter 1. The Zodiac and the Planets. 1. It is due to the divine intelligence, and is a very great wonder to all who reflect upon it, that the shadow of a gnomon at the equinox is of one length in Athens, and of another in Alexandria, of another in Rome, and not the same at Piacenza or at other places in the world. Hence drawings for dials are very different from one another, corresponding to the differences of situation. This is because the length of the shadow at the equinox is used in constructing the figure of the analemma, in accordance with which the hours are marked to conform to the situation and the shadow of the gnomon. The analemma is a basis for calculation deduced from the course of the sun and found by observation of the shadow as it increases until the winter solstice. By means of this, through architectural principles and the employment of the compasses, we find out the operation of the sun in the universe. 2. The word universe means the general assemblage of all nature, and it also means the heaven that is made up of the constellation and the courses of the stars. The heaven revolves steadily round earth and sea on the pivots at the ends of its axis. The architect at these points was the power of nature, and she put the pivots there to be, as it were, centres, one of them above the earth and sea at the very top of the firmament, and even beyond the stars composing the Great Bear, the other on the opposite side under the earth in the regions of the south. Round these pivots, termed in Greek poloi, as centres, like those of turning lathe, she formed the circles into which the heaven passes on its everlasting way. In the midst thereof, the earth and sea naturally occupy the central point. 3. It follows from this natural arrangement that the central point in the north is high above the earth, while on the south, the region below it is beneath the earth and consequently hidden by it. Furthermore, across the middle, and obliquely inclined to the south, there is a broad circular belt composed of the 12 signs, whose stars, arranged in 12 equivalent divisions, represent each a shape which nature has depicted. And so with the firmament and the other constellations, they move round the earth and sea in glittering array, completing their orbits according to the spherical shape of the heaven. 4. They are all visible or invisible according to fixed times. While 6 of the signs are passing along with the heaven above the earth, the other 6 are moving under the earth and hidden by its shadow. But there are always 6 of them making their way above the earth, for corresponding to that part of the last sign which in the course of its revolution has to sink, pass under the earth, and become concealed, an equivalent part of the sign opposite to it is obliged by the law of their common revolution to pass up and, having completed its circuit, to emerge out of the darkness into the light of the open space on the other side. This is because the rising and setting of both are subject to one and the same power and law. 5. While these signs, 12 in number and occupying each 1/12th part of the firmament, steadily revolve from east to west, the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, as well as Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, differing from one another in the magnitude of their orbits, as though their courses were at different points in a flight of steps, pass through those signs in just the opposite direction, from west to east in the firmament. The moon makes her circuit of the heaven in 28 days plus about an hour, and with her return to the sign from which she set forth completes a lunar month. 6. The sun takes a full month to move across the space of one sign, that is, 1/12th of the firmament. Consequently, in 12 months she traverses the spaces of the 12 signs, and, on returning to the sign from which he began, completes the period of a full year. Hence, the circuit made by the moon 13 times in 12 months is measured by the sun only once in the same number of months. But Mercury and Venus, their paths wreathing around the sun's rays as their centre, retrograde and delay their movements, and so, from the nature of that circuit, sometimes wait at stopping places within the spaces of the signs. 7. This fact may best be recognized from Venus. When she is following the sun, she makes her appearance in the sky after his setting, and is then called the evening star, shining most brilliantly. At other times she precedes him, rising before daybreak, and is named the morning star. Thus Mercury and Venus sometimes delay in one sign for a good many days, and at others advance pretty rapidly into another sign. They do not spend the same number of days in every sign, but the longer they have previously delayed, the more rapidly they accomplish their journeys after passing into the next sign, and thus they complete their appointed course. Consequently, in spite of their delay in some of the signs, they nevertheless soon reach the proper place in their orbits after freeing themselves from their enforced delay. 8. Mercury, on his journey through the heavens, passes through the spaces of the signs in 360 days, and so arrives at the sign from which he set out on his course at the beginning of his revolution. His average rate of movement is such that he has about 30 days in each sign. 9. Venus, on becoming free from the hindrance of the sun's rays, crosses the space of a sign in 30 days. Though she thus stays less than 40 days in particular signs, she makes good the required amount by delaying in one sign when she comes to a pause. Therefore she completes her total revolution in heaven in 485 days, and once more enters the sign from which she previously began to move. 10. Mars, after traversing the spaces of the constellation for about 683 days, arrives at the point from which he had before set out at the beginning of his course, and while he passes through some of the signs more rapidly than others, he makes up the required number of days whenever he comes to a pause. Jupiter, climbing with gentler pace against the revolution of the firmament, travels through each sign in about 360 days, and finishes in 11 years and 313 days, returning to the sign in which he had been 12 years before. Saturn, traversing the space of one sign in 29 months plus a few days, is restored after 29 years, and about 160 days to that in which he had been 30 years before. He is, as it appears, slower, because the nearer he is to the outermost part of the firmament, the greater is the orbit through which he has to pass. 11. The three that complete their circuits above the sun's course do not make progress while they are in the triangle which he has entered, but retrograde and pause until the sun has crossed from that triangle into another sign. Some hold that this takes place because, as they say, when the sun is a great distance off, the paths on which these stars wander are without light on account of that distance, and so the darkness retards and hinders them. But I do not think that this is so. The splendor of the sun is clearly to be seen, and manifest without any kind of obscurity, throughout the whole firmament, so that those very retrograde movements and pauses of the stars are visible even to us. 12. If then, at this great distance, our human vision can discern that sight, why, pray, are we to think that the divine splendor of the stars can be cast into darkness? Rather will the following way of accounting for it prove to be correct. Heat summons and attracts everything towards itself. For instance, we see the fruits of the earth growing up high under the influence of heat, and that spring water is vaporized and drawn up on the clouds at sunrise. On the same principle, the mighty influence of the sun, with its rays diverging in the form of a triangle, attracts the stars which follow him, and, as it were, curbs and restrains those that precede, not allowing them to make progress, but obliging them to retrograde towards himself until he passes out into the sign that belongs to a different triangle. 13. Perhaps the question will be raised, why the sun by his great heat causes these detentions in the fifth sign from himself rather than in the second or third, which are nearer. I will therefore set forth what seems to be the reason. His rays diverging through the firmament in straight lines as though forming an equilateral triangle, that is, to the fifth sign from the sun, no more, no less. If his rays were diffused in circuits spreading all over the firmament instead of in straight lines diverging so as to form a triangle, they would burn up all the nearer objects. This is a fact which the Greek poet Euripides seems to have remarked, for he says that places at a greater distance from the sun are in violent heat, and that those which are nearer he keeps temperate. Thus in the play of Phaethon the poet writes, kai ei taporo tangythen dev ekrat ekei. 14.